Thus, you're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. The Israel-Hamas war has brought back memories of the Yom Kippur War, a war which started about 50 years ago and reset equations in the Middle East forever. This war was fought between Israel on one side and Egypt and Syria on the other. Israel was caught by surprise then too and took time to mobilize its own soldiers, many of whom were on leave for Yom Kippur. There are eerie similarities between what happened 50 years ago and what happened now. Israel, though, managed to stem the advance of both the Syrian and Egyptian sides after 3 days then and soon launched its own counterstrikes. The attack by Hamas was also one of the most deadliest attacks on Israel's now. The Hamas militants invaded southern Israel by land, sea and air and fired thousands of rockets deep into the country. Within hours, hundreds of Israelis were killed and many were taken as hostages. Now on the northern side, another terror organization, the Hezbollah, has opened fire. It was perhaps only a matter of time. The attacks came as Israel massed troops and heavy armor around Gaza in its retaliatory campaign against Hamas terrorists. The Israel military reopened and responded with artillery fire and bombed Lebanese territories as well. Meanwhile, in all of this, even as the world is wondering exactly how this war is going to pan out, for how long, and exactly in which direction and in how much territory, Iran's role is under scanner. After the war broke out, Iran took the lead and celebrated the Hamas assault. They even praised the attackers and claimed that Israel has suffered an irreparable failure on both military and intelligence fronts. Now, all of this is not surprising. But as it stands, they have refuted allegations that they have been behind or together in this attack with Hamas. And there is not enough evidence to suggest or to prove just yet that they were involved. This, though, is still a matter that is being debated all across the world, especially in the US, and we'll tell you why, if Iran was indeed directly involved in these attacks. Was the attack by Hamas a planned, coordinated effort, just like the 1973 war? We'll take those questions to our guests in just a bit. But first up, as Israel pummels the Gaza Strip with air raids, the fear of this another front at the north is now growing. And that's because exchange of fire between Israeli and Hezbollah fighters has taken place. So this has happened after an anti-tank missile was fired from Lebanon. All of us were believing that this is just a matter of time, even though they've not openly said that they're joining this war, but clearly it is beginning to happen. Now, this missile targeted a military post in Israel, and this action was taken by terror group Hezbollah. Now, there is both this has been in solidarity with the Hamas action, and also after Israelis killed 3 Hezbollah fighters in a retaliatory strike. The Israeli army has said that they have responded and attacked Lebanese territories. The only question is, how long and how far will this continue? Will this become an open, full-on war on the north side as well? Now, the US, as American President Joe Biden has said, is fully behind Israel in anything it needs. So what is that US help that has reached Israel or is on its way, help that is absolutely necessary for Israel as it looks at a multi-frontal war? So measure one is that aircraft carrier Gerald Ford has already been deployed. There is also interceptors to replenish the Iron Dome that has come under heavy pounding after days and days of missile attacks from the Gaza. There's also guided missile cruiser armed with guns that the US is providing. Fighter jets like the F-35, F-15, F-16 are in the region. There could be more build-up from the US side, which again could also act as provocation, as some have already warned. And Secretary of State in US, Antony Blinken, is all set to visit Israel as well. Now, the other big question is over, as I said, the role of Iran. Many experts believe that an attack like this by Hamas could not have been done without Iran's explicit understanding and support. So let me get you more on that. A WSJ report has said that Iranian officials approved the attack in a meet in Beirut. So there was direct involvement, that the Iran government gave a go-ahead a week before the attack to the Hamas terrorists. WSJ has quoted unnamed Hamas and Hezbollah fighters or members for this report. Now, how has Iran responded? Iran has denied these accusations, saying that these are political in nature. We did not intervene in decision-making of other countries, is what they have said, although we all know the relationship between Hamas and Iran. But Here's what they've also said: but we kiss the hand of those who planned the attack. So they're of course not shying away from the fact that they give full credit and intellectual cover and backing to Hamas, although they're denying a direct role. What is the US saying at this point of time? US is saying that Tehran has always backed Hamas. Not a surprise there. They're aware of this. Of course, this is something they've been taking up with Iran, but they're being cautious, they're being careful at this stage, saying that at this stage there is no evidence of a direct involvement as far as Iran is concerned. But while US is steadfast behind Israel, its recent dealings with Iran, suspected to be behind this attack helping Hamas, has raised several questions. Why is that? Because Tehran was given access to $6 billion by US just in September, so barely days before this attack was mounted by Hamas. The money was paid to free 5 detained Americans. These Americans were held for sanction-busting offenses by Iran. This waiver was paid in frozen Iranian assets from South Korea to Qatar. Now, the USA is facing questions internally and externally over this aid that immediately preceded the attack, given the track record of Iran and even US suspicions that Iran uses any money and funding it has for terrorist purposes. In fact, Republicans at home are pressurizing Joe Biden-led administration to now refreeze these funds. Let me also now go across to Rafael Romo, joining us live from Tel Aviv from our sister concern CNN. Rafael, I want to begin by asking you, first up, the situation in Israel. Does the IDF still suspect that there could be Hamas gunmen, terrorists in their territory?
It is a possibility, definitely. It is a possibility, but very unlikely at this point, especially given the situation over the last few days. Let's remember that this is the 5th day of combat and that Gaza has been pounded around the clock. So it would be very, very rare that you would find something like that at this point. What I can tell you is that the Israeli forces say that as many as 1,500 militants with Hamas, their bodies have been found here. So that gives you an idea of how intense the fighting has been over the last few days. But there is no evidence that that is still happening here.
Right. For the benefit of our viewers, Rafael, also give us more, whatever you know about the Israeli counter-offensive at this stage.
Well, let me tell you, based on what we've seen here on the ground, Israel is preparing for a ground invasion of Gaza that appears to be imminent on this, the 5th day of fighting. There were new airstrikes in Gaza earlier today, as the Israel Defense Forces say 300,000 troops with tanks and heavy artillery are massing near the Gaza border. The Israeli military says they're getting ready to, quote, execute their mission. And let me tell you, we are here in Tel Aviv. We're about 70 kilometers north of Gaza. Just a few moments ago, we heard 3 loud explosions. Difficult to tell from our vantage point what that was, but that gives you an idea of what's happening here on the ground.
There has been, of course, widespread concern of the civilian collateral that could happen because of these Israeli counteroffensives. And there has been some reports emerging that US could play a role in arranging a safe passage for Gaza civilians via Egypt. Egypt that has so far blocked that side of the border as well. Is there anything more you're learning on this?
Yeah, let me answer the first question. So, yes, that is true. That is a concern by the UN, the humanitarian situation in Gaza. In the next few hours, Palestinian authorities say that they expect that the power will be cut off. The same thing can happen with the water. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are trapped there. As a matter of fact, the Palestinian authorities say that the death toll has increased to 1,055. Now, on the other side, there's 1,200 people who have been killed. Now, about safe passage for civilians, as far as we know publicly anyway, there has been no indication, no announcement or acknowledgement by any government that that is actually happening. As a matter of fact, one of the last bridges connecting Gaza to Egypt, the Rafah bridge, was bombed yesterday, and it was destroyed. So the options for the civilian population are getting more and more limited by the hour.
Just, since you've been there and you're trying to speak to as many people as possible, what will be, Rafael, Israel's longer game plan here, and even that of Hamas and allied forces? Because one of the concerns around the world is just how long this war could continue and how much could it expand in terms of territory.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made it very clear what they want to do is annihilate, destroy, make disappear Hamas forever. It's the way they attacked this country, the terror attacks that started on Saturday, have really created a sense of indignation here in Israel, because not even civilians were respected. We're hearing reports of women and children, very young children, who were massacred in some of the surrounding areas around Gaza. So as you can imagine, this country is outraged about what happened, and the Prime Minister has said that the mission is to destroy, completely destroy Hamas. And that's the reason why they have amassed forces around Gaza, about 300,000 military with tanks, with ammunition ready to strike. We understand that there's going to be a ground invasion. We don't know when, but that is a very likely possibility in the next few hours and days.
Given that there has been some fire exchanged back and forth on the northern side as well, on the Lebanon side by the Israeli IDF, how concerned are all sides about the expansion of this war, including Israel's allies?
Yeah, that is a big concern indeed, not only for Israeli and Palestinian authorities, but also for regional leaders, because something like this can very quickly get out of control. And let me tell you, the incident that you're talking about, Israel struck inside Lebanese territory after anti-tank missiles were launched at an Israel Defense Forces military post near the Lebanese border. This is according to the IDF. They said that earlier today. Lebanese group Hezbollah said they fired on an Israeli side with guided missiles in response to the killing of 3 of its members on Monday. So that gives you an idea about what's happening here. Not only that, but the Israeli government also said that rockets were fired from Syria. They landed on an open area, and no reports of injuries or casualties, but there's definitely a concern that this can be much bigger than it already is.
Well, I think we will, of course, get to know a little bit more of where the U.S. stands with Antony Blinken's visit that's going to start very soon. Rafael Romo, thanks a lot for joining us from Tel Aviv and giving us your ground assessment.
Thank you.
We're also joined by another special guest. Let's go across to Gabriel Noronha, former U.S. State Department advisor on Iran, is joining us. We've been discussing, Gabriel, just before you joined us, the links between Hamas and Iran, and of course the suspicion that Iran was actively participating in this attack, in its planning, possibly its execution as well. But I want to begin by asking you, how do you think the Hamas fighters, terrorists and others managed to keep the Israeli intelligence in the dark and catch them so much by surprise? That's the first question swirling around in the minds of everyone today. Just how was this possible? What do you think?
So a lot of Israeli intelligence was very much focused on threats in different locations. They believed that Palestinians in the West Bank would be launching attacks. That's where there had been a lot of turmoil. The Gaza Strip had been relatively quiet. And so they were looking in all the wrong places. There were a small minority of people who thought that it was going to be Gaza. And then what ultimately the Hamas terrorists did is they took out observation posts. They took out the early monitoring sites first. That was the first thing that they attacked. And they did it with such overwhelming force that they weren't able to send out warning signals in time. Then they were able to breach the fences and then go slaughter whole towns on the other side of the wall.
Let me come to you, since you were the US State Department advisor on Iran till as recently as 2021. What do you make of the suspicions that Iran was behind this attack?
Iran is certainly responsible for everything. The only question is whether they directly planned and executed this attack. Iran has supported Hamas since 1992. They give them about $100 million a year, which is a lot for Hamas. It's not a large organization. They trained 6,500 of their fighters. They provided rockets, ammunition, weapons, fundraising, operational support. So I think of Iran as kind of their parent. This is an organization that they normally approve of certain operations beforehand. And at the end of the day, Iran has been fomenting a lot of the anti-Israeli rhetoric for generations.
Yeah. The US decision to give $6 billion to Iran or defreeze that aid to Iran just recently, or just a week before this attack was mounted, that has come under a lot of question. Do you think that was fundamentally the wrong decision to make?
Absolutely, it was. And it gave Iran and Hamas the certainty that they would have financial backing through the war. Now, the $6 billion doesn't go directly to this war, but it's sort of like if you put $6 billion in your savings account, you're able to draw out of your checkings account or draw out of your credit cards. Iran's currency markets were really unstable until they got the $6 billion. This provided them the stability needed to execute this war. Now there's a large debate in the United States about whether that $6 billion should be frozen again.
Yes.
Almost every Republican lawmaker is in favor of it, and now Democrat lawmakers as well are calling for this money to be frozen. And I think the White House is now actually considering whether they will do so.
No, that was going to be my next question to you. The pressure that is mounting on Joe Biden with the sheer, just the timing of the aid being released and then this attack being planned has been pretty embarrassing. Now, US being a steadfast supporter of Israel, do you think that they will be able to make that decision to defreeze this aid? And also, many are questioning whether this aid in exchange or in lieu of freeing 5 American prisoners was necessary in the first place.
So I'll address the second question first. It was not necessary to be given to Iran.
Right.
I negotiated 2 hostage deals during the Trump administration with Iran. We were able to get Americans out for just simple one-for-one prisoner exchanges. And what happened in this deal was it was 5 Americans released for 5 Iranians released. And then on top of that, there was the $6 billion given. That was just poor negotiating by the administration. There's nothing else to it. So this money is sitting in banks in Qatar. It has not yet been dispersed, and each dispersal is supposed to be approved by the U.S. government in advance. The good thing is we can now review these withdrawals indefinitely. And certainly as long as this war is going on and as long as Israel is supporting Hamas with financial and military aid, that's exactly what should happen.
I wanted to understand this, and for the benefit of our viewers, what exactly needs to take place? What are the processes for the U.S. Congress and others to be able to defreeze this aid?
So they're very complicated legislative tools that they can do, but they can force the Treasury Department to basically suspend sanctions relief. Normally, providing money to Iran is a violation of U.S. sanctions, and banks never want to be doing any of that. And so what's happening here is that the Treasury Department gave a blanket waiver and said, we will not sanction you if you do these kinds of things. Congress can go and rescind those assurances to banks, and then those banks will have zero interest in facilitating the cash transfers.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on just why you think the Biden administration did this? Because, you've had many part of the administration, even till yesterday, talking about the concerns over Iran. The history is known to everybody. The suspicions were always there. They know what Iran does in funding and aiding Hamas. So why was this decision taken in the first place, you think?
Look, it was led by, there was a group in government that was very sympathetic to Iran. And now it's actually come out that many of them were reporting directly to Iran. And now they're under FBI investigation here in the United States. Some of the people involved were actually reporting directly to the Iranian Foreign Ministry asking for permission. So this is a massive intelligence failure in the United States. There appears to have been either an espionage ring or an influence ring. And those people were at the top levels of U.S. government advising and carrying out these decisions. There's a huge reckoning here in Congress on these issues, particularly because one of the alleged Iranian agents is actually working at the Pentagon still today with a
Wow.
very senior security clearance.
But what you're describing, Gabriel, is an extremely serious breach of propriety and processes and background checks.
Absolutely. Members of Congress are outraged. Actually, the leaders of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee this morning sent a letter to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, demanding a full investigation of all these accounts and all these problems that we've been seeing here because the concerns are so deep. And that's why some of these people are under law investigation now. Iran has spent decades trying to infiltrate the United States, trying to influence it through think tanks. And they've actually been incredibly successful in the past 2 years. We just didn't realize how deep the problem went. Now the public and Congress is understanding, and they're asking a lot of questions.
In the final couple of minutes, Gabriel, I do want you to talk to our viewers a little bit about how you see some of the other Arab countries. We know their historical position, but some of the other Arab Muslim countries that have traditionally supported the Palestinian cause, how do you see them responding? Because every day there is concern that this war could expand in intensity and also in territory.
Absolutely. So after the Abraham Accords, Israel made peace with the UAE, with Sudan, with Bahrain, Morocco. What we've seen is those countries have had far more restrained responses. They haven't been attacking Israel as much. And what we've seen is countries that we were looking at making peace with Israel still have not said very positive things towards Israel. It's important to note that was the original goal, really, of these attacks by Hamas. The goal was to split the Arab countries from Israel again, make them more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and prevent the peace deals from going through. And it appears that they're being quite successful. In terms of regional escalation, that is something that concerns every nation in the region. The concern from Israel is that Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon to Israel's north, will enter this war and make this sort of a two-front war. Hezbollah is significantly larger and more capable than Hamas. They have the ability to destroy Israeli cities with their massive rocket and missile arsenal. Iran typically won't get involved in them directly, but what they do is they train, they arm, and they equip the terror proxies that go and attack Israel.
And do you see the U.S. stepping in directly if the war was to expand?
Well, we've already seen 14 Americans killed.
Yes.
There are 20 Americans missing. Some of those may be kidnapped. So we're on the edge there now. The question is simply, does Israel want us to be involved and in what manner?
Right.
They have their own military on the ground. They're very capable. So I think we are already going to be providing Israel with many weapons, Iron Dome interceptors to protect against rocket and missile attacks. I don't suspect that you're going to see U.S. military boots on the ground, but if the war expands, you could see some targeted operations by the United States.
And my final question, Gabriel, do you see that some of the sympathy to the Palestinian cause or the justification for even having a group like Hamas be elected and operate for the last couple of decades and more, do you think some of that sympathy to this cause has evaporated around the world because of the very brutal, barbaric nature of the attack that was also in some cases broadcasted not just to family members of the victims, but to the world at large, even though we are seeing some pro-Palestine rallies break out in different continents with some very questionable language, slogans and posters. But do you still feel that as far as country to country relationship is concerned or larger groups are concerned, this would evaporate that sympathy that it had?
Absolutely. I think what you're seeing, certainly in the United States, is people who don't normally pay attention to Israel-Palestinian conflicts waking up and saying, This group looks a lot like ISIS. It looks a lot like Al-Qaeda. Their tactics of beheading, their tactics of burning their victims alive are really, again, barbaric. And so it's changing a lot. One thing that I think it's important to know is Hamas's goal here is to have Israel retaliate. They want to see images of buildings leveled in Gaza. They want to see the collateral damage. That's why Hamas uses human shields. They put their headquarters in hospitals and schools, and they are sort of hoping that Israel retaliates and destroys these things, and then they want to use the images of the bodies to gain sympathy. And that's simply something that people shouldn't fall for. It's the whole point of this. That's why they provoked Israel like this. And hopefully it doesn't work, because I think everyone in India remembers the terrorist attacks that have happened there. They understand there's a difference between attacking militaries and declaring a formal war, and there's a difference between that and targeting civilians, targeting women and children, and killing them violently.
Absolutely.
There's no moral equivalence there at all.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. And I hope that that tactic that the Hamas has employed, possibly successfully for several years, will have diminishing returns from here on. Certainly, we're seeing signs of that as that tactic becomes very obvious and transparent. Gabriel, thanks a lot for speaking to us. It was an absolute pleasure. We look forward to having you again on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the sheer brutality, barbarity of this attack was also caught in several massacres that took place around the Gaza Strip. Nick Robertson of CNN has visited this village where the army, the military of the Israeli force found entire families assassinated and decapitated civilians. Take a look at this report.
The drive into Kfar Aza is chilling. Evidence of Hamas's butchery everywhere. This Israel Defense Force general shocked at what he found.
I thought about General Eisenhower that come to the death camp in Europe, and the first thing that he said is bring the press, young children.
He did the same, inviting about 50 journalists.
You will see. It's a big massacre, a big disaster.
Have you ever seen anything like this in your career before?
Never.
Less than a mile from Gaza, 70 Hamas fighters stormed in here early Saturday, some even flying.
They're telling us this is one of the paragliders that flew in here. You can see the engine here, the propellers here made of carbon fiber, the fuel tank up here, and the frame of it and the seat at the front.
The IDF in control now after a 2-day battle. Hamas lie where they fell. Only now the extremes of their barbarity becoming apparent. 700 plus civilians lived here. How many were killed? Still unclear. How they died? Brutally apparent. Some decapitated, they say.
I also want to go across to more guests joining us. Remember, the larger issue that we're dealing with it, exactly what is going to be done as far as the suspected Iran role is concerned. What is it going to take to get to the bottom of this? And then how is the world going to react to a lot of these forces surrounding Israel that have often openly supported terror attacks or militancy are on Israel in past several decades? Avi Melamed is founder of Inside the Middle East Institute, a Middle East expert and author. Joining us from Tel Aviv, Adam Scott Bellos is CEO of the Israel Innovation Front, also joining us from Tel Aviv. Avi, let me begin with you. What do you think the Israeli government would like to do and would like to see its allies and partners do and find out of who were the forces behind Hamas that provided support for this absolute barbaric and unprecedented attack on civilians?
Thank you for having me. We know who is beyond it. Iran is beyond it. Look, Hamas is a member within Iranian-backed axis of evil that includes Hamas, Islamic Jihad in Palestine, Hezbollah, Houthis in Yemen, Iraqi-backed Iraqi militias. The hands that butchered innocent civilians, babies, women, and men in South Israel are Hamas and Islamic Jihad ends. The mastermind is in Iran. You may ask me, how do you know? The answer is very simple, because Hamas says so. Hamas leaders met frequently with leaders of the Iranians. Hamas leaders met with the leaders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
But Iran is denying this. Avi, Iran is denying this. That's why I'm asking you this question. How do you prove this? How do you get to the bottom of this?
Let us remember what is the Iranian regime. This is a regime that brutally murdered young girls in the streets of Tehran because they were not wearing hijab. Who would you like to believe?
No, I'm not saying that it is that they can be taken on their face value, but I'm just saying that other countries, of course, would like to have proof in their hands to be able to act against Iran.
There are proofs, and there are going to be more proofs. Once the investigation will be concluded, including testimonies, including investigation of people that have been caught, the picture will be much more revealed. There should be no misunderstanding about it. Iran has been operating this array of armies of terror across the Middle East. The Iranian regime is gladly sacrificing Israelis, Palestinians, Syrians, Iraqis, Yemenites, and others at the altar of the Iranian regime. This is a dangerous and brutal regime. There are many examples to how dangerous and brutal this regime is. We should have no misunderstanding about the danger that this regime is presenting to the world.
I understand.
The Iranian regime has an interest in further fueling the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Iranian regime is constantly working to destabilize the Middle East. This is one of the most dangerous regimes that we are dealing with. And we have to be very clear about it. If we want to have any kind of future, of hope for Israelis and Palestinians, the first step is to start in dismantling this structure of terror that the Iranians built. We have to first eliminate Islamic Jihad and Hamas military capacities, so they will not be able anymore to play a role of destabilizers in the service of the Iranian regime. And here is one more thing important to understand. Many people in the Arab world, many Palestinians in Gaza Strip hold Hamas for many years responsible for the gloomy reality of Gaza Strip. They openly say to Hamas, you sacrifice your own brothers and sisters at the altar of the Iranian interest. There is a mounting anger in the Arab world, in the Palestinian street over Hamas. We can understand definitely why.
Okay. Professor Asif Ramiz Daudi was with us. He's also a Middle East expert. I think we've lost his link for a little bit with him. But I want to go across to Adam Scott Bellos as well. Now, I can understand that obviously there are grave concerns over Iran's structure, the military structure that Avi is talking about, and the funding and the support that they've been giving to Hamas and other groups over the years. Would Israel be willing to take on Iran directly, or will it stop at dismantling this military infrastructure of the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad?
First, I want to say thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be on again with Avi. Avi, I'm a big fan of your work, have been for many years. Do I think that Israel is ready to take on Iran directly? I think that Israel has been ready to take on Iran directly for the last 20 years. If you look at what Prime Minister Netanyahu's entire mission as a statesman and a prime minister of the state of Israel has been for the last 20 years. He's been, I think in total, he's been prime minister for 15 years, but his modern career has mostly been about warning the world about Iran and wanting the world to engage in Iran, engage against Iran or with Iran or towards Iran, however you want to word it. And I think it's also very important to note that Benjamin Netanyahu has been at the forefront of trying to teach the world about the evils of Iran. You saw the if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck speech. He's given he has spent the majority of his time when addressing the UN General Assembly speaking about Iran. The main thing is that the rest of the world has failed to believe what he has said. And I mean, just like you said earlier to Avi, how do we not take them at their face value? It's very easy. Okay, the Middle East has a history of forced veiling of women and forced deveiling of women. And where you find forced veiling and forced deveiling of women, you find Islamic extremism. There is only one Islamic extremist government still in existence today that has an eschatological apocalyptic view of what the world should be, and that is the Ayatollah's regime, Khomeini's regime. Okay, it is not the Iranian people, it is not the government that they thought they were getting from the 1979 revolution. Okay, no one expected this to become what it became all those years ago. There is no way that you can trust anything that comes out of the Iranian regime based on their actions and the fact that they are the world's largest sponsor of terror. Do I think that Israel is ready to engage? We've been engaging. We've been sabotaging their nuclear program for the last 10 years. Okay, if you remember a couple of years ago when the JCPOA went into action, I believe it was before Biden took office and before Trump took office, the Mossad did that unbelievable operation where they were able to go into Iran and take their archives, and they proved with their archives that they had been continuing their nuclear program. Unfortunately, the lead from behind foreign policy of President Obama created a ripple effect across the Middle East. Most people don't understand that the speech that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave to Congress all those years ago during the time, I believe it was like right before the election of Romney, but it might have been a little bit later. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm mixing up my elections and my countries. It was before the elections here in Israel. Netanyahu went to Congress and spoke at a joint session of Congress. He did this, and this was the beginning of the Abraham Accords.
Right.
Okay, this was the beginning of the Abraham Accords. This was the message that was sent to the world saying, we're not doing this anymore. You're wrong. This is a disagreement between friends, but we cannot trust them. They are bad actors in the region.
Absolutely. And I think the US has acknowledged that, but the US has also stopped short. Even as Anthony Blinken, touches down in Israel, they've stopped short of saying that we can prove that there is a direct Iranian role right now. But I'm going to come back to both of our guests on what the US and other Israeli allies can do. Professor Asif Ramiz Daudi is also back with us. Professor Asif, what is your take? Should there not be a price to pay for Iran as well, given its long-term funding and tactical support of the Hamas?
Well, what I have to say here, the price is to be paid, that's true, but the price will be paid by the entire world community if this war goes on, because this is not the era for war. That is one thing. And we have seen how we have suffered a lot because of the Ukraine and Russia war, and right after the Corona war, I mean, the kind of struggles that we had seen. So here, everyone is going to suffer. So it's the responsibility of the sensible world community to come together and try to de-escalate what is going on there. That is one thing. Now, when we talk about, let's say, Islamic extremism or giving this religious name, look, we have to go into the history. I don't endorse anything that is happening now. I rather criticize if something of this sort happens. But we have to look at the history. Nothing happens overnight. I just, need to understand one perspective. Like, we cannot generalize things like that.
No, actually, but Professor Asif, I'm sorry, but I have to intervene. What you are saying is generalizing of this conflict and generalizing which, goes on to cover up the brutality, the sheer brutality and the barbarity of this attack. Now, I can understand that the history may be complicated to some, and I can understand that this goes back a long ways, but nothing in history or in present can justify what has taken place, the barbaric attack by Hamas.
Yeah, exactly. No one can justify what is happening, and killing someone, especially when one life is taken, it's even not allowed in Islam. So it's like something, this is un-Islamic, I tell you, one. But is it the fight between religions, or it's because of the some sort of two nation, or they demand their own rights, and something is, I mean, that's why I said
I'm not sure. I'm not interested in whether it is about religion or not, whether it is about land or territory or not. Whatever the reasons may be, it cannot justify the actions of Hamas. And, I'm sorry to say, but this intellectualization of why someone picks up a gun and becomes a terrorist militant organization versus fighting for their rights with other communities do in peaceful ways is not something, I'm telling you honestly, is not something people in India tend to buy, because we've seen this playbook, we've suffered from this. So any sympathy for anyone who picks up the gun and guns down civilians is not going to come.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we have to be fair. This brutality is something that no one can endorse. But at the same time, as I told you, there's the long, I mean, if we go back to 100 years, let's say, there has to be a period. It must stop somewhere.
So,
who is going to stop?
And obviously for 100 years people have tried, and certainly since 1948, a lot of people are also questioning, does Hamas even want a solution? Does Palestine even want a solution? They've rejected a two-state formula forever. Then what is to be done? Certainly we cannot agree on what the Hamas philosophy is of wiping out the state, the Jewish state of Israel. Nobody's going to agree to that.
No, there are two things. One is Hamas, the other one is the entire Palestine. So when you talk about the entire territory, the area, the region that they live in, so they also have their own genuine rights, okay?
Sure.
So if there is something that is done by some groups, we do not endorse that, but we as the world community, sensible community of the world, we should think about coexistence.
Absolutely, I am with you. And I think Israel, in the spirit of coexistence, unilaterally withdrew from Gaza in 2005. And it was a golden opportunity for Palestinians to rebuild themselves and live in coexistence. But I'm sorry to say, history is not making the Palestinian side look good. We cannot, paper over that. But I've got two guests from Tel Aviv joining us. I'll allow Avi to come in as well. Avi, we've heard this over the last 5 days, unfortunately, a lot of justifications being given. And of course, this whole question over occupation, colonizing and decolonizing. How do you respond to what Professor Asif is saying?
Can you repeat that?
This is for Avi, yes.
Thank you. Look, the answer is very simple. All you have to do is to read Hamas chart. Hamas formal chart says clearly, Israel has to be eliminated as part of jihad. And here is another important piece of information. This is only first step as far as Hamas is concerned, because Hamas is saying, in the end of the day, we, Hamas, we want to establish a global caliphate. And everyone on this caliphate should be living according to the rules that Hamas will set. And this is a strict translation of the Islamic Sharia Codex law. So there should be no misunderstanding about it. Here is something else to remind you, and you mentioned it, and it's very accurate. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza Strip and handed over Gaza Strip to the rule of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority ruled Gaza Strip for a year and a half until 2007. During that period of time, Gaza Strip was flourishing. In 2007, Hamas massacred the Palestinian Authority in Gaza Strip. 800 people of Fatah were massacred by Hamas in Gaza Strip, and Gaza Strip became Hamas Islamic Emirate. So please, do not tell us story about history. Gaza Strip could have been a flourishing place. Who destroyed Gaza Strip and dragged Gaza Strip, who destroyed Gaza Strip and dragged Gaza Strip to this gloomy reality is Hamas. I'm not the only one saying, I am not the only one saying that. The Arab world is saying that. The Muslims,
Professor Asif, let's not talk over each other. Let Avi finish. I'll try and come back to you. Yes.
Let me reiterate what I said. The Arab world, the Muslim world, the Palestinians, many of them are Gaza Palestinians. They are saying to Hamas in his face, you have dragged Gaza Strip to hell. You have sacrificed Gaza Strip and the people of Gaza at the altar of your extreme ideology. You have butchered your brothers and sisters at the altar of the Iranian regime. Do not come with stories about 100 years ago. Let us see the facts. Let us look at reality for what it is. This
I also firmly believe that history cannot begin in 1948 alone. If it is about territory and who has rightful or solitary claim over that territory. So history then has to go to, 2 millennia back. And I don't think anybody wants to do that, because you cannot stop and decide this is where I'm going to stop, where history is more beneficial to me. But I have a minute left. I'll give a minute to Adam as well. Adam, one other point that is possibly in all honesty raised by people is that you have to separate the Palestinians from Hamas. But has it become difficult to do that?
I actually think it's very easy to do that. I think it's always been easy to do that. But you have to remember that the Palestinian national movement, which is very different from the Palestinian people, is rooted in the idea of the national resistance against the Zionist entity, which is the Zionist movement to the state of Israel. So I think that there's a real reality that Palestinians will have to look to the future and decide who they want to be. Do they want to be the Palestinians of late who have been unable to ignite a regional, holy war to liberate Palestine? Or do they want to become an economically independent, viable, democratic country that could live next to a Jewish state? And if they decide no, the resistance will continue. You can debate history, you can debate facts on the ground. At the end of the day, nearly 1,000 people are dead. 60 to 100 people have been taken hostage. 40 babies had their heads chopped off. Babies, women, and children have been indiscriminately killed in the streets. So you can debate facts or figures or whatever, but I'll let the reality of the last week speak for itself. Okay? You can separate Hamas from the Palestinians. That's fine. But I can tell you right now, Hamas will be dismantled, and this will be the end of the idea of national resistance and liberation from the Zionist entity, because it's very clear, while we may have a very well-equipped fighting force that is extremely efficient, we do not go into the streets and indiscriminately kill men, women, and children, behead babies, or rape women and then kill them. It's just not what the Israeli people stand for. It's not what the IDF stands for. It is exactly what Hamas stands for. It is exactly the same type of behavior that we have seen from the revolutionary regime in Iran. The reality speaks for itself. So
Absolutely.
I don't care about 19...
Well, I think they've done very little to hide that. I think the Hamas terrorists wanted to do exactly what they did. They wanted the world to see it.
This is the last and final attempt by the radical Islamists in the world to ignite the regional holy war that they have so wished to ignite for the last couple of years, and especially since the Abraham Accords pretty much killed that idea. You will see, this will not be a war of Arab unity like the October War or the Yom Kippur War or the Six-Day War. This is going to end. If it becomes a regional war, it's not going to be a war of Arab unity against Israel. It will be the Abraham Accords countries versus the Iranian proxies and Iran.
Okay, I have to leave it at that. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. We look forward to having you again. It is, of course, an issue that is really vexing. It has vexed world politics for a very long time. Whether this is going to be some final solution for either side, we don't know. We'll continue to track this very closely. And on the other side, we will get you exclusive reports by our team from CNN News 18 and more from Israel that is mounting its counteroffensive against Hamas.
Tel Aviv, and as you can see, sirens sounding.
सही है, सायरन बजा 30 सेकंड के अंदर हमें भागना होता है.
Massive barrage of rockets coming in here.
The sirens have gone off. People are taking cover. We got off the bus. People are taking cover.
Teams of fighters on hang gliders, or motorized paragliders, flew over the border and secured terrain for the main ground assault. A 400-strong elite force on the ground attacked the fortified Gaza fence. Videos issued by Hamas are said to show fighters breaching the security fences. It also released video of drones it says it used for border surveillance. The final part involved moving hostages to Gaza, mostly achieved early in the attack, a source close to Hamas said. In one well-publicized hostage-taking, fighters abducted partygoers fleeing a rave near the kibbutz of Re'im near Gaza. One analyst told Reuters that Hamas probably succeeded beyond their expectation, but now they'll have to, quote, deal with an Israel determined to decimate them.
לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
और जेरौत में है और जेरौत में हर जगह आप देख सकते हैं ये मिसाइल अभी थोड़ी देर पहले कुछ मिनटों पहले गिरा है। करम आप थोड़ा सा नजदीक से दिखाकर चले, हम लोग यहाँ से निकलेंगे क्योंकि यहाँ हमें बताया गया कि मूव ऑन, यहाँ से निकलिए। व्हेन इट ड्रॉप्ड आप देख सकते थोड़ी देर पहले ड्रॉप हुआ है, कुछ ही मिनटों पहले धुआं निकला है, गाड़ियां रुक गई हैं, लोग यहाँ रुक गए हैं। मिसाइल आप देख सकते। करम आप इधर से दिखाइए, करम यहाँ से तस्वीरें दिखाइए। देखिए हर मिनट गाजा पट्टी से हमला हो रहा है, एयर को सिक्योर नहीं किया। इस तरह से मिसाइल से जब भी हमला होता है वहां देख सकते हैं इस तरह से वहां मिसाइल गिरा और ये आग लग गई। When it dropped.
מתי נפל?
לפני חצי שעה.
Half an hour ago.
हाफ एन आवर, 1 घंटे महज आधे घंटे पहले ये मिसाइल यहाँ ड्रॉप हुआ है और देख सकते हो ओपन स्पेस में गिरा है और कितना प्रभाव होता है वो हम आपको लगातार दिखा रहे हैं। यहाँ एम्बुलेंस तुरंत पहुंच जाते हैं, जब मिसाइल से हमला होता है तो एम्बुलेंस की गाड़ियां पहुंच जाती है। अगर किसी को कुछ हुआ तो ये लोग उन्हें तुरंत कैरी करते हैं, उन्हें मूव करते हैं इस प्लेस से। तो सड़कों की हालत क्या है जेरौत की, ये पूरा जेरौत है, देखिए वीरानगी छाई हुई है यहाँ और इधर आगजनी हो रही है। एक बार फिर आपको करम इधर दिखा दें, करम इधर दिखा दें। हम यहाँ से निकलेंगे, रुकेंगे बिल्कुल नहीं क्योंकि कहा गया है कि रुके ना। इम्पैक्ट आप देख लीजिए, मिसाइल आपको दिख रहा है, बड़ा मिसाइल है। करम प्लीज कम देखिए बड़ा मिसाइल है, बड़ा सा मिसाइल यहाँ गिरा है, वो इम्पैक्ट देख सकते हैं, धुआं अभी भी दिख रहा है। तो इस तरह से बड़े बड़े मिसाइल से भी हमले हो रहे हैं और धुआं कितना है। करम अब आप यहाँ से निकल जाइए क्योंकि यहाँ रहने की हिदायत हमें नहीं दी गई है।
As bombs continue to fall in Gaza City, inside this courtyard, a possible refuge for some. 13-year-old Isra al-Kishawi is leading a Reuters camera crew around a school, operated by the United Nations, that's become a shelter for several families. Some children are playing, others are looking up and pointing at Israeli aircraft in the sky. The airstrikes are the worst in the 75-year history of conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Al-Kishawi is saying she can't sleep at night. She goes to the bathroom every few minutes because she's afraid of the rockets. She says, 30 people sleep here. There's no space for us all. The UN Secretary General says 137,000 people are sheltering inside UN facilities like the school. But their safety is not guaranteed. The UN said on Tuesday that Israel's air operations have hit schools and UN buildings across Gaza with civilian casualties. Al-Kishawi tells us there's no running water in the bathroom and that she's developed a rash because she hasn't been able to bathe in days. She says, I wish I could be a normal child living with no war, no rockets, so we can safely return home.
يصدر من رعيم باتجاه قطاع غزة. ها هم جنودنا الذين أثخنوا في عدونا.
Viewers, there are just no words to describe the horrors unleashed by Hamas in many residential localities in Israel. Over the last 24 hours, chilling reports of how the Hamas brutalized children, some even say babies, have shattered faith in humanity. In my hand, viewers, I have a photograph of a bed. Actually, it's more a